So imagine this, a global superpower, an absolute titan of industry and technology just stops. Not for a year or two, we're talking about 3 entire decades of economic winter. This is the incredible story of Japan's lost 30 years. And believe me, it's one of the most wild and important stories in modern economics.
I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? How does that even happen? This wasn't just a little dip or a normal recession. This was a deep, stubborn freeze that just wouldn't thaw, no matter what they did. To really get our heads around it, we've got to look at the numbers.
Okay, this table pretty much says it all. You look back at 1990, Japan is on fire. The economy is booming. Fast forward to 2020 and nothing. Growth? Gone. Inflation? Flatlined. But here's the kicker. Look at that public debt. It went from a totally manageable 67% of GDP to an absolutely staggering 250%. They spent a mountain of money trying to fix things, and the economy just shrugged. So where did it all go wrong?
Well, the strange thing is, the story of the lost 30 years doesn't actually begin with a crash. It starts with an insane boom. Back in the 80s, Japan was an economic juggernaut. They were building the best cars, the best electronics. They seemed unstoppable. And that success, well, it was making some other countries, especially the United States, very, very nervous. The US was basically worried it was getting left in the dust, so they put a ton of pressure on Japan to kind of slow down. And all that pressure led to this one single meeting at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. A meeting that would, no joke, change the course of Japan's entire future. Now, let's be super clear about this. This wasn't just the market doing its thing. This was a deliberate political decision. The goal was pretty simple: weaken the dollar, strengthen the yen, and that would make Japanese exports more expensive for the rest of the world. But what was meant to be a simple course correction set off a catastrophic chain reaction inside Japan's economy. The Plaza Accord was like an earthquake for Japan's economy. Suddenly, their prized exports were way more expensive, and the government started to panic. They were terrified of a massive recession hitting them right around the corner. And this is exactly how it played out, one domino tipping over the next. The strong yen scared them, so they cut interest rates to the floor. Well, what happens when money is super cheap? People borrow it, and they buy stuff. In this case, they bought stocks and real estate, fueling one of the biggest speculative bubbles in human history. Of course, the Bank of Japan eventually got scared and slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The bubble burst, and it unleashed something way worse than just a regular recession. And this is a really crucial concept. After the crash, the value of everything, stocks, land, it all collapsed. But the debt? That stayed. So imagine an entire country, from the biggest corporations to the average family, suddenly stops spending and investing. Instead, everyone is just desperately trying to pay back what they owe. This absolutely crushed the economy. But there was something even weirder going on just beneath the surface, something that prevented any kind of real recovery. You know, in a healthy economy, a crash like this is terrible, but it's also a kind of cleansing fire. Bad companies go out of business, and new, better ones rise from the ashes. But in Japan, that didn't happen. Instead, they decided to keep basically everyone on life support, which created this bizarre and insidious problem: the rise of the zombie company. These were companies that, for all intents and purposes, were dead. They should have failed. But the banks, who were terrified of admitting how much money they'd lost, just kept giving them tiny lifeline loans to keep them breathing. This practice is called evergreening, and it created a literal army of corporate zombies. The scale of this is just mind-blowing. 250,000. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a few struggling businesses. This was a nationwide epidemic of companies that were technically dead, but still walking around, consuming resources. And these zombies didn't just stumble along harmlessly. They were actively poisoning the healthy parts of the economy. So the very policy that was meant to stop the short-term pain of bankruptcies actually created decades of long-term paralysis. These zombies just sucked up loans, they trapped workers in dead-end jobs, and they clogged up the entire market so that new, exciting companies couldn't even get started. That whole process of creative destruction, which is so vital for growth, was just frozen solid. So for years, Japan threw everything they had at this problem. I mean, they took interest rates to zero. They launched these massive stimulus programs that we now call quantitative easing. They basically invented the modern economic crisis playbook. But nothing worked. The zombies kept shuffling along, and the economy stayed flat as a pancake.
Then, in 2013, came this last, big, bold attempt to finally fix things. It was called Abenomics, named after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And it was this huge three-part plan: print tons of money, spend tons of money, and enact major reforms. It was supposed to be the final answer. But there was a fatal flaw baked right into the plan.
And this quote just nails it. It was a paradox. It was a trap. The medicine they were using to try and revive the economy, all that cheap money, was also the food that was keeping the zombie companies alive. So the first part of their plan was directly canceling out the third part of their plan. It was like trying to put out a fire with one hand while pouring gasoline on it with the other.
So you can see the impossible choice they were facing. It's a classic rock and a hard place. Option 1, you raise interest rates. That would finally kill off the zombies. But it would also trigger a wave of bankruptcies and probably mass unemployment, a lot of short-term pain. Option 2, you keep rates at zero, avoid the immediate crash, but you basically guarantee decades of stagnation. For 30 years, Japan consistently chose option 2. So what's the big lesson here? Well, it's about the danger of avoiding pain. They constantly trying to dodge the short-term, brutal but necessary pain of letting failed companies die. Japan's leaders accidentally locked their economy into a permanent state of decay. They stopped that cycle of creative destruction, and the whole system just froze over. And that leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? As we look around the world today, we see other major economies dealing with their own massive debts and their own potential bubbles. Have they learned from Japan's mistakes? Or are we all just destined to repeat them? The story of Japan's lost 30 years is more than just history. It's a powerful, cautionary tale that the entire world needs to pay attention to. Thanks for joining us.